Great, it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to share a little bit more. The format for my presentation is a little bit more around storytelling here. And I'm going to try to stick with the topic of changes. So a little bit of background here on VivaReal. Marco mentioned we're a leading online real estate marketplace in Brazil. I co-founded the company. My name is Brian Requarth. I'm from California. So you may ask, how did a guy from the Bay Area, from San Francisco, how did you end up in Brazil? So about 10 years ago, I got in my car and I just headed down south with a friend of mine. We went to Central America, ended up buying a one-way ticket to Bogota, Colombia. So I was heading all the way down to Argentina was my goal initially. So I made a stopover in Argentina, and usually you can guess there's typically a woman behind these stories. So this is my wife. We met in California. We ended up getting married in Bogota, Colombia, and I lived there for several years, where I started VivaReal. Initially, we started the business focused on Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil. So we had kind of a pan-regional approach initially. And, I went up, I'll get back to that in a second. I'll share with you a little bit more about kind of the changes, in the business over the last couple of years. But back to Brazil, given that that's our core market, and we just raised some significant capital to go in and continue to win that market. I want to give you a little bit more about the landscape in Brazil. So similar to any market in the world, there was the early hype of the internet. And then, unlike many other countries, Brazil went into this kind of nuclear winter, where there was just a decade of no outside investment, no interest from really anyone internationally. And then all of a sudden, end of 2009, you may remember, Brazil graces the front of the Economist. And all of a sudden it becomes a hot item for investors, and people flew in, and a lot of money went into Brazil during that boom time from 2010 to 2012. So a lot of capital went in. 2013, the market kind of cools off a bit. Those investors flew back to Europe, back to the US, and we entered in kind of a correction phase. And I like to think about the next 5 or 10 years. I'm very bullish on Brazil in the long term, given the enormous population and huge potential. So that's kind of where we are. We're in wheels in motion, a market that's growing quite a bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the eras of entrepreneurship from my vantage point of building this business to where it is today. When we started out, we were kind of in a bootstrapping phase. I was living in Colombia at the time, starting the business, and we had this Latin American approach. Kind of the eBay of Latin America was the original idea, and that was we were in several different markets, which proved very challenging. We went up to the Silicon Valley. We talked to investors in New York, and pretty much nobody wanted to invest in Brazil at the time. This is 2008, economic crisis. Brazil what? Why would we go there? That's crazy. And so, after visiting the VCs, this is basically my reaction here of, it's actually a real photo of my passport. If you want to buy me a pint later, I'll give you the backstory on this photo, but basically rejected, right? I mean, after all of these years of hard work, moving to Colombia, launching the business in the region, just literally nobody was interested. So I did the obvious thing that anyone would do. Naturally, I bet my house on the opportunity. So you can imagine the negotiation with my wife. Hey, babe, we're gonna sell the house, and I'm gonna put all the money into Brazil, into an internet business. Quite a tough negotiation, to say the least. So it turned out to be a good decision. I get to say I told you so, even though I don't actually say it. But she's happy now, and in 2011, 2012 was kind of the next era where we were able to bring on some investment. We actually brought on some very good angel investors that had built these businesses in other markets. A few of them are here today, so thank you guys for believing in it. And we shifted from a LATAM approach to an AAB strategy. That was our mantra, all about Brazil. The next kind of era was, we had a little bit of capital, we had a very clear path to success, and we built out the management team, and we expanded geographically across Brazil. So now we're kind of entering in a new era, which is the kind of scale and innovate mode, thinking about the future. So that's a little bit more about the eras of entrepreneurship, and I wanted to reflect on a few changes and what's changed since then in our business. So when you don't have any money, your focus has to be on sales. You have to acquire customers. So the DNA of the business initially was very driven on acquiring customers. So we built a sales-focused company. Over the last 12 to 18 months, we've been shifting towards more of a product and engineering company, which has been quite challenging in Brazil, given that the talent that's there's many talented people in Brazil, but they typically join banks or consulting firms, and the idea of joining a startup isn't an attractive opportunity. It's changing. So I spent almost an entire year trying to recruit a VP of engineering or a CTO. I looked all around the country, and then finally I had to look abroad. So I looked, I ended up finding a CTO who happened to be in India, and I ended up hiring him. He had a great background at some top tier companies on the internet, and the result of that was it was a complete failure. I underestimated the complexity of the cultural clash of bringing someone from India to Brazil. So we quickly scrambled, and we were able to find some good engineering leadership, which is spearheading our shift to an engineering company. And now we're very focused just on attracting and retaining the brightest people in Brazil to build a very product-centric company. So where are we today? Marco just announced, mentioned that we raised a round a couple of weeks ago. We raised a large round, so we've raised about $70 million of capital from international investors. We're going after a highly fragmented $2 billion real estate advertising spend a year market opportunity that's very concentrated offline today. So we're bringing that online and consolidating the market. So today we're the leader in traffic. We've since passed the incumbents that have been around since the 90s. So I look at it's a success story in that case. It's still, I would say, relatively mid or early stage. There's still a lot to do, but the leading metric on traffic, which revenue typically follows traffic in these businesses, we've done very well in that sense, and the revenue has grown quite a bit. We've grown since last year about 3x, so we're on a nice growth curve here, and we've got a lot of cash in the bank, and so really the next 5 or 10 years are going to be all about disrupting the marketplace, innovating, and ultimately becoming the clear market leader in Brazil. So that's kind of a quick wrap up. If you'd like to come to Brazil and visit, we've got the Olympics. Brazil wasn't too happy about the results of the World Cup, but hopefully they'll get a few medals there in the Olympics. But thanks a lot.